Well, today I'm going to share the recipe for my mother's delicious scones, what we call Mummy's sweet white scones. And this recipe is what memories are made of for me. It reminds me of when I'm running home from school into the kitchen, and there would Mummy be with her a big baking tray of scones, taking them out of the essay as a special treat for us after school. So here in this bowl I have 2 pounds of plain white flour, and into that I'm going to add a little pinch of salt. Choose a nice wide bowl so you're comfortable when you're mixing it. Then I want 3 heaped teaspoons of baking powder. Now when I say heaped, I mean put the spoon in and get as much as the spoon will hold on top of it. So 3 heaped teaspoons of baking powder. We also want some caster sugar, 2 ounces of caster sugar. Now make sure that you run your fingers through it like that to get the air in, and also to make sure that the salt and baking powder and sugar are all evenly mixed in there. Now, next, some butter. So 6 ounces of lovely Irish butter, and you could cut this into cubes and just rub it in, because scones are made by the rubbing in method, as they call it. But I'm going to show you a little trick. I've just taken this out of the fridge. I've got 6 ounces of butter here, and so what I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to grate the butter into the flour, and then the pieces are already quite small and it'll be much easier to rub them in. We toss it around like that, so this makes the whole thing much faster. So there we go, that just takes a few seconds to do. Mind your fingers when it's coming close to the end, because these graters are much sharper than you think. Just get all of the last bits out. Just rub this through the flour, and then with your fingers sort of rub the butter into the flour to make it smaller and smaller. Now actually with scones, if you want really light scones, the trick is not to rub the butter in too much, because if it's too fine, for example, if you decide you want to do it in a food processor, it'll whiz it really fine, and then your scones will actually be much heavier. You don't have to go too far, but let me just also show you for a second on the rubbing in method. So it's not a question of doing this, lifting it up and doing that. Run your hands underneath, lift it up so you're getting air in to the scones as well, and then with your thumb, run your thumb across your 4 fingers like that. So each time you're making the little pieces of butter smaller and smaller. So that'll just take a few minutes, particularly when you've grated in the butter. It doesn't take very long. Now it's also important to choose a wide enough bowl, because of course I could make these scones in a smaller bowl, but basically what would happen then is I'd be all hunched up. And if you're feeling, any time when you're cooking, if you're feeling uncomfortable or clumsy, you're either in the wrong position or you have the wrong utensil. So it's actually a big simple stainless steel bowl like this, or even it could be a plastic washing up bowl, is a really good bit of basic kitchen kit. Now look, here we are. I think that feels good. You see there are kind of slight little lumpy bits still, but most is kind of, it's not very fine, but most is rubbed in. So there we are, I think that's fine. Now at this stage, if I want to make plain scones, all I do is add the eggs to enrich it, and also some milk. But if you like, you could add in all sorts of things. These are a few sultanas, and choose the best dried fruit. So add those in. They could be currants, they could be raisins, they could be dried cranberries, they could be dried cherries. You could put crystallized ginger in. You know, once you have the basics, you can do all kinds of variations on the theme. So there they are, mix them to it. And now what we need is some egg and some milk. So I need 3 eggs. So these are lovely fresh eggs from our happy lazy hens that are running around the farm there. So, and the better quality of the eggs, the fresher they are, the more delicious the scones will be. So look, here's a huge big one, and I'm hoping for a surprise. I'm hoping that this may actually be a double yolk, and that'll be a bonus. Look, there it is. So in fact, normally I just need 3 eggs, but actually I have the equivalent of about 3.5 eggs there. So beat this up well, and normally I need 15 fluid ounces of lovely rich whole milk, but I might cut it down just by, say, 1 fluid ounce because of the extra egg there. So beat this up well. And now I'll just take some milk. This is our own Jersey milk. Am I not spoiled? This is coming straight up from the dairy. So I want about 40, well I do about, normally it's 16 fluid ounces, but I'll put like about 15 fluid ounces there. Look, okay. So we pour this in. And again, don't use low fat milk for this. Use, you know, the whole milk at the very least. So beat that up. There we go. Now, make it well in the center and pour pretty much all of this in one go. We'll keep a tiny bit back because of that bigger egg. Now, again, the way you mix is quite important. The scones are made really, really quickly. Oh, and I forgot to say that it's really important before you start to turn on the oven and make sure the oven is fully preheated. So turn that on to 230 centigrade, so it's good and hot and preheated. So hand into this, hold the side of the bowl, hand into the center, and make your hand like into a claw and stir in a full circular movement from the center to the outside of the bowl. And then when you get to the outside of the bowl, the scone dough is made. It's as quick as that. And keep on stirring in a full circle. There we go. Look, I'm going to put another tiny little bit in, but it's pretty much, one doesn't want to have them too wet, otherwise they'll spread. So collect up that last bit around the edge there. That's good. This is going to make about 19 or 20 scones. Well, it depends on what size scones you decide to make. I need lots of flour on the worktop and sort of gather it up. Now you could also put some candied peel into that if you want to. There we go, get the last of the dough off your fingers. So it's worth going to the sink and washing your hands just so that it's easier, they're not too sticky and it's easier to handle the dough. Now of course you could make half this quantity of scones, and scones, like soda bread, are really best on the day they're made. So if you can't eat all of them, they do freeze quite well, and then take them out, refresh them and pop them into the oven. So look, take some flour on your hands, and then a bit like making soda bread, just tidy it around the edges and don't knead it at all. If you knead it, you'll make it quite tough. So now turn it over, flip it over like that. Now you could of course make it into a great big loaf if you wanted to. Sort of flatten it out and then take a rolling pin, or you could flatten it with your fingers if you wanted to, and then just roll it out. Oh, my rolling pin needs a bit of 3-in-1 oil or something. It sounds it sounds squeaky as though it hasn't been used for ages. There we go. And yeah, the thickness is quite important. So you want it about an inch or a generous inch thick. The first cut is always the lightest. So if you have to roll up lots and lots and do it a second time, basically they'll be actually less light than the first ones. Now, just we'll brush off a little of the excess flour there. So you can use a cutter, any size cutter you like, but if you are using a cutter, make sure to take it right to the edge like that, and then have as little as possible a waste between each one, because remember I was saying the second rolling will be less light. The thickness is actually really important, because if they're too thin, they'll be kind of, the proportion will be wrong, there'll be too much crust and too little a nice scone in the middle, and if they're too high they'll just topple over. So I go for scones, not huge big tall ones, but ones that are what I call the right proportion, so you can put the right jam and butter and cream and so on, whatever you like on it. So Mummy used to use a knife and she'd cut them into squares or diamonds. Look, little bits like that. So they could be any shape. Some of the children would like smaller ones, others would like bigger ones, and you could just choose whichever size you want. Look, so just for example, just cut like that, and then remember, if you were doing this with all of it, you wouldn't need to re-roll any of it. So leave a little space between them. So what I like to do is I like to brush the top with a little egg wash. In fact, you know what I'll do? I'll put that egg in there and use that little leftover bit of egg and milk that I have there. I'll take that, we'll just brush the top of each one with a little egg wash. This is a little beaten egg and a little milk. Then dip it into the crunchy sugar. Now, we used to literally fight over the sugary tops as children. And of course you don't have to do this, but it's lovely. And with the scones then, sometimes I make sugar and spice ones, so that I would put a little cinnamon or mixed spice or something into the sugar on the top. Notice I'm not sprinkling the sugar over the top. I'm literally brushing them with the egg, and I'm dipping them into the sugar, so it just picks up the amount that I need just for the top of the scone, and there's not sugar all over the baking tray to burn. Now I might just do this one just with egg wash. And you can also sprinkle chopped nuts or something over the top if you want to. But it's important that the dried fruit is actually inside, not sticking up, because otherwise it will actually burn and become quite hard. So look, there we are. Pop these straight into the oven, a good hot oven, and they just take 10 minutes to cook. So as a general rule, I prefer to use a conventional oven rather than a fan oven for baking, because I find the fan is great. You can put several trays in at a time, but actually it's a more drying heat, so things tend to stale faster if they're cooked in a fan oven. And the other incredibly important thing with baking is to remember it's an exact science, so you need to be really pernickety about your actual measuring, so that you actually have your really accurate measurements. Otherwise, one time it'll be fantastic, the next time not quite so fantastic if you're a bit cavalier with your measurements. Oh, good. They're lovely and golden. There we are. So we'll take those out. This one here is one of the ones that I didn't put any sugar on the top. There's another one. And then here, the lovely sugary tops of all different sizes. And you may have been wondering whether I should have greased the baking tray, but there's no need to grease the baking tray. They slip off very easily like that. Now, generally you give them a few minutes to cool off before you tuck in, but there are 9 of us in the family. I'm the eldest of 9 children, so I can tell you we were all gathered around Mummy waiting for our turn to get our scones. So split them and just have them with butter if you want to. You could put cream, and look how the steam is still coming up from them. A little butter onto this one here. The butter will melt onto it. Oh my goodness, how delicious is that? Some nice bit of blackberry apple and sweet geranium jam, a little dollop of cream, and then maybe I've got a little fresh mint over here. You can imagine how delicious that would be. So that's so many different options there. This recipe was my very first Simply Delicious book, with my very first television series, and half of the country tell me that they love this recipe and make it regularly. This recipe made in minutes, just 10 minutes in the oven. I'm just going to take a big bite of this in a moment now, because for me, this is what memories are made of. It transports me right back into our kitchen in a little village called Callaghill in County Laois, where we'd rush up from school, which was at the bottom of the hill in the village, and burst into the kitchen and hope that Mummy would be just taking a tray of these lovely sugar top scones out of the oven, and we'd queue up, lots of us, lots of little mouths to feed, we'd queue up in anticipation and excitement. So this is what memories are made of for me.